Whenever you're talking about saddle trees, and you call this is an association, the other one that we looked at was a stockman, and all that indicates to a saddle maker is the general shape of the swells. The swells or the fork are what names the saddle, because everything else can be changed. But if you say that it's an association, it's got to have the general association shape. Like an association, the reason it's called an association is because back whenever the Turtle Cowboy Rodeo Association started standardizing things for the rodeo cowboys, they took an old Ellensburg, a Hamley Ellensburg tree, and modified it, and they called it, this is going to be our association's tree. And so it's been called the association ever since then. And but you can have a low association. You just lower the swells, and it's a low association. You can have an association that's wider. Standard is 14 inches with 1 inch of undercut. You can make it 14 and a half, 15 wide, whatever you want to do. You can take a 14-inch one and put more undercut or less undercut on it. And not all tree makers' patterns are the same. One tree maker's modified association is another guy's old and young. It's just, it just varies from tree maker to tree maker. The cannels, you can do an awful lot with a cannel, and the cannel's where you really ride a saddle back there. You've got pressure in your feet and your butt's up against that. From here to here is where you ride one. You don't ride them in the swells. If you're jammed up against the swells, something's going on. But from here back's where you ride one, and this will tell you if it's going to be comfortable or not. One of the things that is new to the Southwest for about the probably last 20 years, 25 years, historically, almost all the saddles that were built in Texas or the Southwest, the groundwork, the seat, started out up here somewhere and traveled down to a point along in here somewhere, and it was downhill all the way, and then it turned immediately and came up the cantle. What some good saddle makers finally figured out years ago, and I don't know exactly who it was, probably Dale Harwood. He's the best saddle maker I've ever known. But you want to put a forward seat. They call it a forward seat in there. And if you draw a line from the base of the cantle to the base of the cantle, then in front of there has to be a flat spot. And that flat spot on here is about 2.25 inches right there. It can be 1 inch or it can be 10 inches, but it's got to be at least an inch or so right in there. What a forward seat does is, if you just don't think about it and you climb on a saddle that has a forward seat, you have an arch in your back, you're sitting there straight like this. If a saddle doesn't have a forward seat in it, where the groundwork travels back like that and turns and goes up, you get on it, and what it's doing is throwing you back. Well, your body counters and you bend over. So you're sitting there with a hump in your back. But if you look at photographs of cowboys in the 20th century, almost all of them are riding like that. And that's why, because they were thrown back and then hunkered over. And with this forward seat, you get in one and you're just automatically sitting up straight. Makes a tremendous amount of difference. And then getting the dish, if you lay a ruler over the cantle like this, and then you can see the space between the back of the cantle and the ruler, that's called the dish. And about an inch of dish is standard in most saddles. You can get 1.5 inches or you can get none. But 1 inch is kind of a standard amount of dish. And this seems backwards, but it's the way it works. The smaller a guy is, like if he weighs 98 pounds, he can use a wider cantle and more dish. But if you have a bigger guy, say the 250, 275 pound guy, he needs a narrower kennel with less dish. Needs to be flatter in here and narrower. I've got two good friends that I've built saddles for years ago, and they both probably weighed close to 300 pounds, and we put them in 15.5-inch seats because they had spade type kennels that were 10.5 inches wide, and that just opens up the seat jockey measurement for them. So a big old ham will go in there as opposed to a wider one that comes around here and you just have a little area.